Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are recording. So if you have friends that couldn't be here, let them know that we will have a recording up on our YouTube page, but I don't want to run long. And I do want to get through the information we have planned because I'm really excited about it today. I think because I introduced myself to Michelle and said hello, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Janine Carpenter, the Director of Research and Policy at the Women's Fund of Greater Chattanooga. This is the second session of I Am an Advocate, which is the first module of the Advocacy Institute that the Women's Fund is launching. And this first module is really an introduction to all things advocacy to help everyone get their grounding and know what we're talking about when we're talking about advocacy. So today is going to be one of my favorite sessions. I have a feeling. This is what we're doing. We're going to start answering the questions like, what is doing advocacy? What do I do? Like, what do you actually do to be an advocate? And can I be impactful? Of course you can, but I'll talk about all the ways you can later. So what we'll cover today is we have an advocate profile, as well as a conversation about some different kinds of advocacy, about making advocacy something that works for you, and being true to yourself in what you do. Connecting your why you're doing advocacy with your what, which is just connecting your purpose with your methods. And then an introduction to what we have coming at our next session. So today is really just taking a step further from the why advocacy or what's advocacy that we talked about at the first session and looking a little more specifically, though not really. The true specific action items will come in the fourth meeting of this series. So in our first meeting, we talked about the noun advocate, which is one who argues for a cause, a supporter or a defender, a person who pleads in another's behalf, right? One of the most common uses of the term advocate that you'll ever hear is when we're talking about attorneys, and when we're talking about lawyers. But the reality is that we are all advocates in some way. And most of us have been advocates in one way or another, either for ourselves or for our loved ones, or in a legislative way, or in a policy way. And so today we're going to talk a lot more about the verb. Yay! To advocate, which is to speak, plead, or argue in favor of, to find that way, in summary, to be heard in what it is that you are trying to change about the world, right? To advocate. And so in order to do that, the way that we are framing these sessions is an introduction and then to have an advocate speaker. So since we're answering the question, what is doing advocacy? I thought our best approach would be to have someone share how she has done advocacy in just a variety of ways. You're familiar with how the Women's Fund does advocacy, right? In this very formal legislative manner, with, our legislators, our governor, our business wear all the time, but there are so many ways that we can advocate. And so today I am introducing you to Stacey Martin, who I first met because she wanted to get more involved in Women's Fund advocacy. She told me she wanted to learn about advocacy, but in retrospect, that's crazy talk because she had already figured out so much of it on her own. And she has done so many impressive things with advocacy, both locally and in different arenas than the Women's Fund always works. And so I asked Stacey to share her story, which will then be adding to our advocate profiles that we're creating a library of. So Stacey, I am going to hand off to you without any spoilers, except support her business and let you tell us your story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Janine. This is really a privilege that I get to talk to you guys. I did prepare a brief presentation, which I'm going to attempt to share now. Let's see if this works. Okay. And hold on, I gotta move my thing. I'm giving all my secrets away. Okay, do you guys see this now? Okay, excellent. All right. Hi, my name is Stacey Martin. I'm originally from Wisconsin. And I'm here today to tell you guys a little bit about my story. This is the 7th state that I've lived in. Oh, I can't move this. Let's see. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is the 7th state that I've lived in. I moved to Chattanooga a little over 3.5 years ago. Everywhere I've lived, I've been involved in some sort of thing. They haven't been consistent of the same thing, but I've been involved everywhere I've lived. So when I relocated to Chattanooga for my job, I made a really conscious decision that I would put down roots and like sort of build community. I bought a house. So that meant that hopefully I was going to stick around for a little while. There are a couple of organizations that I reached out to. I was in the junior league. This is the 3rd league I've been in. I transferred in to the Chattanooga League. And I was looking for other things to get involved in. So I stumbled upon the Women's Fund, and Katie offered to meet me for coffee one day to sort of talk a little bit about what this was all about. And when we sat down, she told me this was the 49th worst state for women to live in the country. And I was like, where did I just move to? That was really disturbing. So then I sort of started digging in a little bit more. But little did I know how important that building community was going to be when I moved here. Because shortly after I moved here, less than a year, I found out that I had this really rare genetic mutation, and it gave me an 80% chance of getting stomach cancer and a 60% chance of getting breast cancer in my lifetime. And it's, they think it only happens in 1 in every 9 million people. It is very, very rare. I had to figure out what to do and what was going to happen. I didn't have a doctor here in Chattanooga. I initially went to the Mayo Clinic because that's where my mom, who was diagnosed with this as well, found out about it. So we went to her doctor. And then I soon found out that the NIH was doing a research study. And so I was very fortunate to get into that. So there were 2 courses of action. The cancer grows diffuse, so it grows in the lining of your stomach. So there's no tumors. So it's very, very hard to find. And the 5-year survival rate with somebody with this stomach cancer is less than 5%. So there was 2 courses of action that I could take. One of them was to have surveillance done and do an endoscopy and hope that they plucked a cancer cell in my stomach to know that I had stomach cancer. Or the second choice, which was a lot more drastic, was to have my stomach removed. So in September of 2019, I had my stomach removed, and that changed a lot of things for my life. As they did the pathology on my stomach, and they found 17 spots of cancer in it after they took it out. So it was immediately validating that I made the right decision. But everything changed sort of in my life. So as you can see in that little picture, that's sort of how my digestive tract is. So my esophagus is attached directly to my small intestine. So I don't have a lot of space. I just have a tube. And because of that, I have to eat every 2 hours. I have to chew my food to a puree before I swallow. And I have to eat a lot of protein because that's what fuels me. I actually never showed anybody this picture before, but I always get questions. So I figured I might as well show it. Anyways, so in last November, I had a double mastectomy, and now all of my cancer concerns have been abated, and I'm super healthy. And we're going forward. So the good news is I have lots of life. So I have been involved in lots of things. I feel like I fought very hard to preserve my voice. And so now I fully intend to use it. I mentioned that I was involved in things all over the place. So one of the things last year, I was on the board in the junior league, and I reached out to Janine to see how we could incorporate some more advocacy. Obviously, last year's political climate was extremely heated. And I do believe that advocacy is not necessarily tied to political things. There are certain basic things that we are all entitled to as people that are non-political actions. And we can express our opinions to the people who are representing us so that they know how we feel, because that's their jobs. So let's see, hold on. So this leads to the advocacy portion of things. So because I am a cancer survivor, it's still weird to say that because I didn't know I had it until after it was out of my body already. But there are several organizations that have asked me to speak on their behalf. So federally, I've advocated for 2 different foundations. I talked to Chuck Fleischman, Marsha Blackburn, and Bill Haggerty, and I asked them for $46 billion in funding for the NIH and for cancer research on 2 separate occasions this year. Last year, I was an election official, so I could do my part with people being able to vote. The last thing I did before COVID shut down is I went to the Women's Day on the Hill with the Women's Fund. And that was a really, really, really cool experience to sort of see the inner workings of everything and sort of see how things get done. You have to be patient because it's not fast and a lot of work gets done in the background. But it's cool to learn how things work. I always participate in the Monday call sheets. I print everything off and I write up my notes. So during my lunch hour, I can go sit in the car and make my phone calls. And I think the Women's Fund does a phenomenal job, Janine, dummy proofing this situation. So I feel like if I can do these things, a lot of other people can. But basically, I think it's not everybody will have a situation like mine where things become very clear very quickly about what's important to you. But I feel like the more that you listen, and there's as you're wandering through the universe, things will just come up like, oh, I don't really like how that feels, or something's wrong here. We all have voices, and I think there are a myriad of ways to use them. So bringing all of this together, one of the really cool things that came out of my situation is I started a snack company. So because I have to eat every 2 hours, living down here, it's hot all the time. So I used to have to bring a lunch bag with me because I needed my cheese sticks to be cold. I prefer them that way. So I discovered nuts, and they were delicious and a really great source of protein. So I started a company called Seahorse Snacks. This is my way of sharing my love of food and my story with the world. Stomach cancer is one of the deadliest cancers that exists, and it is the most underfunded cancer. The NIH only had $15 million to do research last year, which is crazy. I mean, there are the popular cancers, the breast cancers, the colon cancers, and it's amazing that we have ways to treat them and to deal with it. My situation is so rare. The only thing that I could do was remove my stomach. So as a part of my longitudinal study that I have with the NIH, hopefully I gave them my stomach. They're doing research and they're going to find ways so that people in my situation won't have to give up their stomachs anymore, and we'll have a way to treat and potentially prevent this. So in a nutshell, that is most of my story. If you guys have any questions, I'd love to answer them. And I really just thank you for the opportunity to share with you my story.
You get so many points for saying in a nutshell. Are you kidding me? Right after talking about nuts. Stacey, that's amazing. And one of the things that's coming up in just a minute in this presentation um, that I plan to talk about is the idea that advocacy um, can save lives. And that's what you're doing. And I think that's really amazing because sometimes we lose sight of of all the things that happen as a result of advocacy because we're caught up in little steps. And what you're doing is likely saving lives. And I think that's amazing. And I'm so grateful that you shared that with us. Um,
Thank
Also,
you.
I always have cold cheese sticks in my fridge if you want to come over anytime. I would probably just ask you a bunch of questions while you ate them. Um, so we're talking about what advocacy looks like, and Stacey has just shared a really amazing story that included working in the process of political participation, advocating on behalf of something, um, literally giving of yourself to something, um, to supporting organizations. And I've shown you a picture of what the Women's Fund does, but advocacy doesn't always have to be quite that formal, right? So, um, advocacy sometimes isn't planned and it sometimes isn't done in a situation where you have all the time in the world to plan it. And we've seen a lot of really amazing advocates and advocacy in our community, even in just the last year. So I'm hoping
Students at Tyner Academy are calling for something to be
this
done
will play.
about
Can y'all hear
structural
it?
issues on their campus. Seniors walked out today, and our Travis Cummings was there and joins us live from Tyner with the message students are trying to get to our elected officials. Hello, Travis.
Hey, David, that's right. The seniors here at Tyner Academy High have been super vocal right now, especially since their freshman building was closed due to roof issues. They say that the issues extend way beyond that, though, and have worsened here in recent years. So they're calling on county leaders and school officials to turn this place around. Seniors at Tyner Academy High School
There's no video.
walking out of the building. Chanting for change.
So I'm going to pause. I'm sorry the video wasn't showing. And I'll just go ahead and continue just telling you what that was. I don't know if y'all are familiar with all of the structural issues that were discovered in the Hamilton County schools in the past year and a half to 2 years. But as a result of some of those, the students, the senior class at Tyner Academy actually staged a walkout at school to protest the conditions that closed the freshman building, demanding that the students who are following them at that school have a facility that is equipped for them, and safe for them to learn in. And that's advocacy. That's high school students banding together to advocate. And in this case, the senior class at Tyner advocating for the benefit of the freshman class coming behind them. And these are our local students. And, the point is that advocacy can happen anywhere. This is a graphic that we often use at the Women's Fund to talk about all the different things that we can do and how our advocacy program works, right? We do research, we formulate ideas, we try to solve a problem, we partner with folks, we join in coalitions, we take action, and all the different things we can do, from writing case statements to writing letters to writing laws, to being lobbyists. And there are so many ways. But we're an organization and we're an advocacy organization. And sometimes it feels like, yeah, of course you can do that. You have the entire strength of an organization behind you. But what am I supposed to do if I'm just one person? What am I supposed to do if I'm doing it alone? And to those people who say, but I'm just one person, my response is, oh, the freedom. The freedom to do whatever it is you care about and you want to do, right? Because you don't have any motivation except your own. You don't have any why except your own. And so to do advocacy, you basically have to ask yourself the 4 questions: your why, your what am I going to do, your how am I going to do it, and who are you going to join on your advocacy journey? So we talked about the why last time, right? Why are you advocating? What is the cause that you are advocating for? What is the issue that you care about? And what is your motivation to care about that issue? In a circumstance like Stacey's, right? She's advocated for multiple things. She's advocated for women's issues. She's advocated um, for cancer research funding, right? She's had those unique motivations, but what is your cause and what is your motivation when you choose what you're going to advocate for? But then next is, what is your goal? Like, why are you advocating? Are you advocating because you're trying to change a law? Are you advocating because you're trying to change a system? Are you advocating because you want people to know what it is that you care about and what you want to do about that thing that you care about? Are you advocating for a big picture idea or for a little picture idea? What is your goal? And once you know your goal, you can say, how am I going to get there? Right? So first know your why. Why are you advocating? And then know what it is that your end game is. Most of the time, your goal is really, really big. And the reality is you have to take baby steps. And this is true as individuals and as organizations, right? At the Women's Fund, we want the status of women in Tennessee to move from 49th to first. That is a really big goal. And so we take baby steps, right? We work on all of the 7, categories on the right side of your screen, from political participation to work and family issues like paid leave, to employment and earnings like gender earnings equity, to health and wellness, right? Talking about everything from mental health to HIV to physical activity. We talk about reproductive rights, ranging from second parent adoption rights to access to contraception, to sex education, poverty and opportunity, violence and safety. And we have to whittle away and take baby steps to reach our big goal. So if your what is, I want gender equity, I have this to say to you: me too. Absolutely. How are you going to determine the steps to get there? What kind of action do you take? What kind of advocacy do you do? And there are so many right answers to this question. I was going to say there's no wrong answer, but there probably is. So I'm not going to put that challenge out there. But I do know that there are so many right actions to, right answers to the question: how are you going to advocate for whatever it is that you're motivated by? And the first question you have to ask is, what's your comfort zone? Like, where am I confident? Um, so you don't have to do all the parts of advocacy at once. You don't have to dive in and do everything as soon as you start to be an advocate. Advocacy takes time. Gender equity is something most of us are really passionate about. It's going to take time. So ask yourself, what am I comfortable doing now? What am I confident doing now? You're on this call, so you're confident learning how to be an advocate, right? You're confident that you are, going to get the information you need to do more. What do you enjoy doing? Do you like writing? Do you like socializing? Do you like really quick phone calls? Do you like social media? Right? There's a place for you to advocate wherever you are comfortable. If you are comfortable in a social setting, have dinner with friends and become an advocate by sharing your issues with them. If you are comfortable on social media, share and repost. But what do you feel good doing? You know, because advocacy is a long game and because it's a hard process, because you don't always have immediate wins, it's important you choose the activities that make you feel good, that will sustain you even if you don't have an immediate win. And so you have to be true to yourself when you're deciding how to advocate. Know who you are and dive in from there. So let's talk about some advocacy actions that have impact. And these are really broad. Like I said, you'll learn specific actions and how to take them and stuff in our 4th session. But here's just a look at some of the things you can do. And I'm certain that at least one of these will fall into everyone's comfort zone, probably multiple. First, you can decide that you're going to learn about our legislature. You can find and follow legislative journalists in Tennessee. Super easy. They tweet really well. You can decide that you want to get to know your legislators. I strongly recommend that. You can share information or you can attend days on the Hill. You can connect to organizations who are working on the issues you care about, like the Women's Fund. That's why you're here. You can donate to organizations doing work in the issues that you care most about. You can protest, rally, march. You can propose changes. You can answer calls to action. You can do something as simple as when you get the email asking you to make a phone call, make the phone call. But I'm not going to tell you how to do that quite yet. But all of these are the kinds of actions that have a strong impact. Take, for example, this image. This is the Signal for Help image that the Canadian Women's Foundation really had a huge advocacy and media campaign around at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. If you've followed the Women's Fund for any duration of time, you'll recognize it because we were sharing it on our social media sites back in April and in May of 2020, right at the beginning of the pandemic, when we knew that with the lockdowns and with people at home, that we were going to see spikes in domestic violence and interpersonal violence incidents. And so the Canadian Women's Foundation, they're members of the Women's Funding Network, which is like our umbrella organization that we work with. They came up with this Signal for Help and they asked everyone in their networks to sign it. They had a partnership with Vogue to get this shared out as widely as possible. And then just a couple weeks ago, it was back on the news. This hand signal that was shared in April and in May of 2020, because a teenage girl was rescued in Kentucky because she used this hand signal, and it was recognized by someone she did it from a car window, and it was recognized, and she was ultimately rescued from a dangerous kidnapping situation. The person who saw it, no one's actually asked where they learned it. They said TikTok, but was it a women's fund that shared this post? Was it an advocate who follows one of the 50 funds that shared this across the Women's Funding Network pages? Was it someone who happened to read Teen Vogue when they sent it out? So when Stacey was talking earlier and I said, you're giving us examples of how advocacy saves lives. Your advocacy is saving lives. And I said, I have another example. This is what it is. This sign saved lives, and it was publicized across social media. And somewhere someone saw it in that way. And so at the time, some of us are on social media a lot. Some of us are rarely on it. I feel this obligation to share some things when I get on it once a month. And so I try to hit share. But whoever did this for the person who saw that girl saved a life just by sharing a post, just by putting something out there. Because now it's credited as being a TikTok phenomenon when in fact it started a long 14 months ago, and actually was not first launched on TikTok. That was a follow-up campaign led by the Canadian Women's Foundation as well. And so advocacy saves lives, even if it's not the big actions, the big scary actions that seem like they are more out there. And so, any advocacy action is a win. And you also have to decide, who do you want to advocate with? I want to advocate with you all on this call because you're here, because you care about some of the same issues that the Women's Fund does. Advocacy is a long game with lots of little steps, and it takes a really long time. And so you don't always want to, do it by yourself. Though you can, you don't always want to. And so the last question that you ask yourself is, who would I like to be doing this work with? So if we go back and we look at all of these sorts of things, who do you want to be with you when you are sharing information? What friends do you want to educate about the issues that you care about? What people do you believe will also care about the same things that you do? Because your cause is your motivation. Your end game is your end game, but there are other people that care about it. And so you have to make sure that you're also saying, hey, join me. Whether it's information advocacy like this, whether it's legislative advocacy, like Stacey asking our policymakers for 46, is it 40, Stacey? $46
billion.
Yeah, I was missing the B or the M. $1 billion, or whether it's simply showing up and making a phone call. Because the thing about advocacy and advocacy action is that it always comes back to your why. Everything comes back to, what is the issue or the cause that you are advocating for, and why are you doing it? And I think it's important, and we're going to keep coming back to always saying, this is why I'm doing it, because that's what keeps you motivated. That's your long game. That's what keeps you going. That in the village that you choose to join you in this. I'm going to stop sharing really quickly and open up the floor to see if there are questions before we talk about a few more advocacy actions. I don't know that y'all would have questions about this. Okay, so the last thing that is really important that I'm not going to do graphically, and I'm just going to talk through in this session, is the difference between advocacy and lobbying and activism, right? Because people often throw around those three terms as if they're very different things, right? You're either an activist or an advocate. You're either doing activism or lobbying. You're either advocating or lobbying. The reality is that they are all like siblings in the fight, and the nuance that distinguishes them is a lot of the time not that real. Right. So we frequently talk about activism, in a popular context as the people who are protesting or rallying or walking out, right? Like the students at Tyner as activists. And they are, but they're also being advocates. And we also always separate lobbyists from activism, right? Because you're working within the power structure as lobbyists, right? You're going into the policymakers' buildings. You're talking to the people who are making the budgets. You're doing this very structured internal work as a lobbyist, but it's still advocating, right? It's still absolutely advocating for what you want to see changed. And I think the real difference when you're talking about lobbying or activism or advocacy is in perception. And it's in the language that we use to talk about it. And so often particularly in the political climate, in a divisive political climate, which we have. When you say you're an activist, people presume that you are divisive or antagonistic. When you say you're an advocate, people assume you are passionate about something and trying to make change for it. And so I think there's a lot of power in saying this is advocacy. This is advocacy if we are rallying, it's advocacy if you're marching, it's advocacy if you have a sign in your hands. Because what you don't want to do is undermine your efficacy by using a term that alienates people. Let me be clear. Activism is advocacy, and advocacy can be done by activism. It's not the way that the Women's Fund does most of or any of our legislative change and advocacy, but they are still completely valid forms of advocacy. And using a term that alienates is probably just undermining it. I frequently am asked by legislators, is it advocacy? Are you one of those activists? And I say no, but I am. I mean, if you're on this call and you're finding out about this and you're doing this work, you are being an activist. And I think that's an important thing for us to put out there, is that lobbying, activism, and advocacy, they're siblings. And sometimes they're just same sides of the same sibling, or different sides of the same sibling, or the same side with different names. And that's something that we have to address up front. I think it's important to talk about as you're introducing the idea of advocacy to folks. And, as you're talking about it, is all of those forms are valid. Those students at Tyner, what they do is every bit as valid as the meetings that all of us have as advocates for the Women's Fund in legislative offices. And so with that, I will stop. I'm ending a little bit early, but I'll stop recording if anyone has any questions or comments. And then if not, I'll also tease up an opportunity to learn everything you've ever wanted to know about the Tennessee legislature.